The wallet was so thick she almost thought it was a book. She had found it on the bench outside the Alderton Street post office at 7:40 in the morning. A Tuesday. Cold. The kind of February cold that makes the city feel abandoned. She had been waiting for the post office to open because she needed to send a certified letter that she could not afford to delay and could not afford to send twice. She sat down on the bench. She felt the wallet under her coat before she saw it, wedged between the slats, the way things get when they fall from a pocket. She pulled it out, black leather, no logo, the kind that costs enough that it doesn't need one. Heavy. She opened it the way you open something that isn't yours, quickly, just enough to look for a name. The name was on a platinum card in the first slot. Eli Vance. Below it, filling the wallet to its limit, were $50,000 banded stacks of hundreds. She fanned one edge with her thumb and counted the bands and sat on the bench in the February cold and looked at the number. $50,000. In cash. On a bench outside a post office that was not yet open. She put it in her bag and went to find a police station. If you have ever held something in your hands that could have changed everything and handed it back anyway, stay with us. Because what Eli Vance does when he finds out who returned it, and what he discovers about the woman who made that decision on a bench in the cold, is a story about the thing that money cannot manufacture. Subscribe right now. You need to hear this one. Petra Vasic was 34 years old, and she had approximately $3,000 in her account, a certified letter to mail that contained an appeal to a medical insurance company that had denied her mother's claim for the third time, and a very clear understanding of what $50,000 would have meant to her life in that specific moment. It would have meant the insurance gap covered. It would have meant her mother's treatment continuing uninterrupted. It would have meant the sublease she had been considering breaking without the penalty, and the car repair she had been deferring for 4 months, and 6 months of breathing room while she finished the freelance architectural drafting work that was almost enough to make the math work. She knew the number to the cent. She had been doing the math every night for 8 months. She walked to the police station 12 minutes away and turned in the wallet. The officer at the desk wrote down the contents, the cards, the cash, the driving license bearing the name Eli Vance at an address in the North Shore, and gave her a receipt and told her they would contact the owner. She asked whether there was a finder's fee protocol. The officer said sometimes owners arrange something. She nodded, mailed the certified letter, and went to work. She told no one. Not because she was ashamed of the decision, she wasn't. The decision had taken about 4 seconds and was not a difficult one. But because she did not want to perform honesty for anyone. She had grown up watching people announce their virtue and had found it consistently less convincing than watching someone simply act. She had not returned the wallet to be admired for returning it. She had returned it because it was not hers, and she was not a person who kept what wasn't hers. And that was the whole of it. The call came 2 days later, not from the police, from a number she didn't recognize, a Chicago area code, and a voice on the other end that said, "Miss Vasic? This is Eli Vance." She sat down. She had been standing at her kitchen counter eating toast over the sink in the 7 minutes between waking up and leaving for the office. "Mr. Vance," she said. "I understand you found my wallet." "Yes," and turned it in. Intact, yes, there was a brief pause. "I'd like to thank you in person, if that's something you'd be open to. I'm aware that's an unusual ask. I can have a car come to wherever is convenient for you." She looked at her half-eaten toast. She thought about the certified letter and the insurance company and the $3,000. And what 50,000 intact hundreds sitting in a police lockup meant about the man on the other end of the phone. "You can tell me an address," she said, "and I'll come." He gave her an address in the North Shore. She wrote it down. She went on the weekend. The house was large in the way that does not announce itself. Set back from the road, not ostentatious. The kind of architecture that costs more because it is trying to disappear than because it is trying to be seen. She had noticed this in her drafting work. The clients who wanted the house to perform wealth always got something that looked like a logo. The clients who wanted to actually live in a house got something like this: quiet, considered, built for the person inside it, rather than the person passing by. Eli Vance met her at the door himself. No staff, no intermediary. He was 51, she estimated, not a guess. She had looked him up, and he looked precisely like the photographs, except that he was also clearly a man who had spent a week being relieved about something. He shook her hand and thanked her before she was fully inside. "Come in," he said. "I've had coffee made. I'd like to explain what was in the wallet, if you'll let me." She let him. He had been carrying the cash because of a private transaction, a purchase of a piece of land from an elderly seller who did not trust banks and had stipulated cash or nothing, which Eli had accommodated because the seller's position was understandable and the land was important to a development project he genuinely cared about. He had stopped at the post office to mail something on the way, put the wallet down, answered his phone, and walked to his car without it. He had not noticed until he was in a meeting 2 hours later and reached for it. The cards could be canceled, he said. The cash was. It was a problem, but it was a solvable problem. What I kept thinking about was the person who found it. He looked at her steadily. The post office told the police they'd seen a woman sitting on that bench. The police tracked you through the receipt. He paused. I wanted to understand who makes that decision. It wasn't a complicated decision, she said. That's exactly what I mean, he said. For most people it would have been. For you it apparently wasn't. And I find that I want to understand it. She looked at him across the kitchen table. The good coffee. The house that didn't try to be seen. The man who had asked a question that most people wouldn't have thought to ask. My mother taught me that the things you do when no one is watching are the only accurate measure of character, she said. There was no one on that bench. It was cold. No one would have known. She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. That's exactly when it matters that you know. He was quiet for a moment. Your mother sounds like a formidable person. She's very sick, Petra said. That's why I was at the post office. I was mailing an insurance appeal. She had not planned to say that. She looked at the window. I'm sorry. That's not relevant. It is actually, he said quietly. I'd like to hear about it, if you're willing. She was, and she couldn't have explained why. Something about the way he had asked. The same quality of full attention she had recognized at the door. She told him about her mother, the diagnosis 14 months ago, the treatment that was working, the insurance company that had denied the claim on a technicality so fine it was essentially invisible, the certified letters and the appeals and the math she did every night. He listened. He did not offer to fix it while she was talking, which she noticed and appreciated. He asked 2 questions, both specific, both showing he had actually followed what she said. When she finished, he said, I know someone at the State Insurance Commissioner's office. Not a favor, a contact who handles exactly this category of denial. I'd like to pass your file to them, with your permission. I can't promise an outcome. I can promise it will be looked at by someone who understands what they're looking at. She looked at him. That's a significant offer for a stranger. You returned $50,000 on a cold Tuesday morning, he said. I think I can make a phone call. She gave him the file number. He made the call that afternoon. She learned this later because the commissioner's office contacted her mother's insurance company the following week, and the denial was reversed within 10 days. Not because of money, not because of influence in the corrupt sense, but because someone who knew the regulation read the denial letter and found 4 technical errors the original reviewer had made. The claim was valid. It had always been valid. It had only needed someone to look. She called Eli to tell him. He sounded genuinely relieved, not in the way of someone who has performed a favor and is collecting gratitude, but in the way of someone who had wanted a specific outcome and was glad it had arrived. She found that distinction important. There were people who helped in order to be seen helping, and people who helped because the problem needed solving, and she had learned slowly and at some cost to tell the difference between them. "Thank you," she said. "I don't have a better word for it." "You don't need a better word," he said. "How is your mother?" She told him. They talked for 40 minutes. She was at her kitchen counter again, but she had finished the toast this time, and she was not in a hurry to end the call, and she was reasonably certain he wasn't either. He asked if he could call again. She said yes. He called on Thursday. She called on a Sunday when something happened with her mother that was difficult, and she wanted to tell someone who would understand the weight of it without offering solutions. He understood. He did not offer solutions. He said, "I'm sorry, that's a hard week. Are you eating properly?" And she had laughed, which she had not expected to do that day. And he had said, "I'm serious. I've found that hard weeks go worse on an empty stomach." And she had laughed again. She asked him once, in the 3rd month, about the wallet. About whether he had thought about what happened to it in the time before he knew it had been found. "I thought about it constantly," he said. "I kept calculating. Whoever found it, if they kept it, they probably needed it, and I could absorb the loss. If they turned it in, I wanted to know what kind of person does that." He paused. "I've spent a lot of my life in rooms where people make decisions based on what they can get away with. I'd forgotten what it looked like when someone doesn't." She thought about the bench and the cold and the 4 seconds. "It really wasn't a decision," she said. "I know," he said. "That's the whole point." She met his daughter Nora in the 4th month, 23, sharp, doing a graduate degree in environmental policy, who had her father's stillness and her own considerably more pointed sense of humor. They had lunch, the 3 of them, and Nora had looked at Petra across the table for the first 10 minutes with the assessment of a young woman deciding something important, and then apparently decided it, because she had relaxed entirely and spent the rest of the lunch telling Petra about a regulatory battle she was fighting with the energy of someone who has found her purpose and has no interest in fighting it quietly. Afterward, walking to the car, Nora had said to Petra, "He's been different since he met you. Lighter, he was not in a bad way, but he was in a contained way, like he'd gotten used to being contained." She looked at Petra. "It's good. Whatever you're doing, it's good." Petra did not tell Eli about this. It felt like something to hold privately. She had a habit of holding the good things privately for a little while before they became part of the general record. It made them more hers. He came to see her mother in the 5th month. She had not asked him to. He had asked if he could come, framed as a question with no pressure in it, and her mother had said, when Petra relayed the question, "I want to meet the man who made the phone call," and so he had come. Her mother had assessed him for approximately 3 minutes over the kitchen table, and then begun asking him about his work with the focused curiosity of a woman who has been ill long enough to have no patience for anything that isn't interesting. He had answered everything. He had asked her questions in return. Her mother had looked at Petra at one point across the table with an expression that in their shared language meant, "This one." He drove home that evening and called from the car. "Your mother," he said, "is extraordinary." "I know," Petra said. She told me something before I left, he said. She said, "Don't wait until you have the right words. My daughter has heard enough wrong words to know the right ones by how they feel." Petra was quiet. "I've been trying to find the right words," he said, "for about 3 months. I think I'm going to take her advice." A pause. "I love you, Petra. I'm not asking anything from that. I just think you should know." She sat with it for a moment. She thought about the bench and the cold and the 4 seconds and the certified letter and the insurance company and the 40 minutes on the phone and the laugh she hadn't expected on the hard day and the man who had asked what kind of person makes that decision because he had, genuinely, wanted to know. "I know," she said. "I've known for a while. Why didn't you say?" "I was holding it privately for a bit," she said. "Making it mine first." He was quiet for a moment. "Then, I love that about you." "I know," she said again, and she could hear him smiling. They were engaged on a Thursday. He had asked on a Tuesday, and she had said she needed 2 days. Not because she was uncertain, but because she wanted to think in her own time and arrive at the answer herself. And he had said, of course, without hesitation, which was itself part of the answer. On Thursday she called him and said yes, and he said he had already made a reservation for Saturday, and was she free? And she said she was. And they were. Her mother was at the wedding in September. In full health, the treatment had worked. The insurance had covered it. The 14 months of math and certified letters and appeals had resolved into a woman in a yellow dress in a September garden looking at her daughter getting married to a man who had made a phone call. She cried from the processional and did not stop until the cake. Nora gave a speech that was funny and devastating in equal measure, and at the end looked at her father and said, "You lost a wallet and found a person. I know which one was worth more. I think you do too." Eli looked at Petra. She looked back at him. He knew. The toast. The cold bench. The 4 seconds. The certified letter. $50,000 in banded hundreds. And a woman who had walked 12 minutes to a police station in February because the wallet was not hers, and she was not a person who kept what wasn't hers. That was the whole of it. That had always been the whole of it. Some things you return not because you expect anything back. You return them because of the person you are when no one is watching, on a cold bench, before the post office opens, holding something that could change everything, and knowing, in 4 seconds, exactly what to do. What's yours will find you. And the right people will always want to know what kind of person makes that decision. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe, because every week we are here, and we are just getting started.